Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. MSI's Z270 SLI Plus motherboard. What is this? Why should you watch and why should you care? In short, if you are looking for a Z270 high-end motherboard for Intel's 7th generation Kaby Lake processors, then stop, you've come to the right place. This is a deal. $150 gets you a full-featured motherboard without being full-featured in the price. Z270 motherboards span the spectrum from $120 at the base to well north of $400 for some of the extreme models. Now, I don't recommend the $400 models for most people, those are a bit crazy, but $200 to $250 is a crowded space with a lot of different motherboards. What happens when you come down from those price points to $150? Do you give up all the features? No, you don't. This has most of the features of the $200 to $250 boards for a lot less money. And it's my recommended board in the sub $200 price point for the Z270 boards. Now, I've reviewed other motherboards, other 200 series boards. I will have an upcoming comparison video comparing multiple Z270 boards, but I like this one. I like this one because it has a lot of features. It has a lot of capabilities, but it's $50 to $100 less expensive than some of the other choices on the market. And I will be building a machine with this motherboard in the near future. Now, before I get into this motherboard specs and features, let me talk to you about the Z270 in general and who should even be considering one of these, because there are other 200 series chipsets. There are B250 and H270 chipsets. Those are primarily meant for people using non-K processors from Intel. Now, to explain that, let me separate out Intel's processors. There are three processors with a K at the end that belong in this board. The i3-7350K, the i5-7600K, and the i7-7700K. What does the K mean? Unlocked multiplier. They can be overclocked and run faster than their standard clock speed. Using the i7 as an example, it comes by default at a base clock speed of 4.2 gigahertz with a turbo boost built into it up to 4.5 gigahertz. However, because the 7700K has an unlocked multiplier, when it is installed in a Z270 motherboard, you can go into the BIOS and with just a couple of key presses, change the multiplier from 45 to 50. And by doing so, it will then run at 5 gigahertz. Now, you do have to provide adequate cooling for this. When I do the installation of a CPU into this, I am going to show the installation of a liquid cooler onto the CPU, and I will show how to overclock it, but it is very straightforward and pretty simple. How much you can overclock depends upon the quality of your specific chip, because each one is made separately, and how much cooling and how much airflow in case the environment that you've built it into. How big is your case? How good is the airflow? Do you use an air cooler or liquid cooler? But most people should be able to get about 5 gigahertz out of an i5, i3, or i7 CPU in this or pretty much any of the Z270 motherboards. What about the non-K chips? The non-K chips would be the i3-7100, the i5-7400 or 7500, or even the i7-7700 without the K. Those processors have a locked multiplier. You cannot overclock them. What that means is even if you buy a nice Z270 board, you cannot run them faster than their design speeds, how they ship from the factory. Most people should put those CPUs into either a B250 or an H270 board. Now, I will have reviews of those boards. That's a topic for another time. But I want to make it clear that this is really meant for the 3K processors, either the i3, the i5, or the i7. Which do I recommend? That's also a topic for another time, which I will be covering in a complete Kaby Lake overview where I cover all the processors, who should buy them, and what the pros and cons of those are. Look for that in an upcoming video. So coming back to this motherboard and its features, why do I think it's the deal at $150? Quite simply because as you spend more than this, you do add features, but you spend a lot of money to get them. Wi-Fi support, an additional LAN port, or additional USB ports, or an additional M2 slot for solid-state drives. They're all very nice to have. The question is, are they worth the money? Well, that's a personal decision. If you want those extra features, then by all means spend the extra $50 and get the $200 board. If you go under $150, you start discarding what I consider to be basic features on the Z platform. What am I talking about? Let's start with the audio chip. This has the next generation 8-channel HD Realtek ALC 1220 audio codec chip. I know that's a mouthful. It's the new next generation audio processor from Realtek that you will find on some of the 200 series boards. Not all of them, but some of them. The cheaper boards, the $120 boards, tend to come with either the 800 series or 1000 series Realtek codecs. What's the difference? Signal to noise ratio, the purity of the sound. If you care about high quality sound, this sound chip has a 120 decibel signal to noise ratio versus the 90 to 95 signal to noise ratio of the 800 series chips. Now, if you're listening to your computer through $30 desktop speakers and you don't record your voice or do anything else, then maybe you don't care. Do you live stream? Are you interested in recording your gameplay? You want a good sound chip. For a little extra money, you do get the latest and greatest sound chip from Realtek on this board. If you go below this, you don't. Intel Gigabit Ethernet. This comes with a real Intel Gigabit Ethernet LAN port on it. Less expensive boards often don't. They come with a Realtek port. Now, the Realtek port works fine. You don't have to have Gigabit Ethernet, but if you play online games, you want it. Lower latency, lower CPU usage, universal compatibility. It's basically the gold standard when it comes to Ethernet ports. As you drop down in price, you tend to lose that feature. Additionally, USB support. This board has USB 3.1 10 gigabit per second superspeed ports, both Type A and Type C. Many of the less expensive boards only have USB 3.0. It has to be added by the motherboard company because the Z270 chipset does not out-of-the-box support USB 3.1. So there's actually an additional USB chip on the board that the motherboard manufacturer has to add and pay for, which is why the least expensive boards don't have it. Nice feature to have, especially with new devices coming out that support that new 10 gigabit per second speed. Finally, perhaps one of the biggest features that people will want to spend the $150 for is NVIDIA's SLI support. What's SLI? Scalable Link Interface. It allows you the ability to install 2 NVIDIA graphics cards into the 2 graphics card slots on this motherboard. The $120 version of this board, which MSI sells as the Pro, does not support SLI. The Gigabyte Z270 $120 board does not support SLI. Z270 is required for SLI, but is not automatic. There's actually a chip on the board that has to be added by the motherboard manufacturer in order to enable scalable link interface so 2 NVIDIA graphics cards can be installed at the same time. Now you might say, I don't care, I don't ever plan to do that. Fair enough. Then maybe for you, the $120 version is fine. Now, linked in the video description below will be the MSI Gaming M5 $200 motherboard, which is the step up from this, and the MSI Z270 Pro, which is the $120 version, which is the step down, missing NVIDIA's SLI support. By all means, take a look, check the prices. If you don't care about SLI, if you don't play online or stream your games, if you don't care about things like that, save yourself $30 and get the $120 version. There's nothing wrong with that board. It will overclock your processor. It will run your system just fine. It's a feature difference, not a performance or capability difference when it comes to the Intel processor. So you're spending $30 more over the $120 board and you're getting better sound, better Ethernet, more USB ports, faster USB ports, and NVIDIA SLI support. That's quite a few features for $30. If you're spending this much money on your system, I think most people should go with this board. That's my personal opinion. Now, just to be clear, all of the boards support AMD's Crossfire. What is Crossfire? It's AMD's version of NVIDIA's SLI. It's the ability to install multiple graphics cards in your system. Now, the $120 version of this board does support Crossfire. You could put 2 AMD RX 480 cards into the Pro board, the $120 version of this board, without a problem. It's just NVIDIA that you have to have this board in order to put 2 graphics cards in. Just something to consider if that's something you may want to do at some point down the line. Now, I said before that this motherboard is very full-featured. Let me run through the list of features and talk about all the components on the board to give you an idea of what to expect. Every Z board is just a little bit different in terms of ports and the options that you have. So what I'm going to do is show you some full-size screenshots and zoom in so that you can see them while I talk about the board. Looking at the motherboard starting at the top, the first thing that I will point out is the 8-pin CPU power connector. Virtually every Z board is going to have one of these that comes off your power supply and provides power directly to your CPU. You can see here that we have 4 memory slots. This supports up to 64 gigabytes of system memory. You should install at least 2 memory modules. Install them in pairs because you have a dual channel memory controller and that improves the speed of your memory. So do install memory in pairs. You could, for example, install 16 gigs of RAM with 2 8GB sticks and then upgrade to 32 later by adding 2 more if that's something you wanted to do. On the right side of the board, we have our 24-pin ATX power connector, main board power coming from our power supply. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, there are 3 CPU or case chassis fan headers. These would be used for exhaust fans, intake fans, or the fan on your air cooler or your liquid cooler. You can see our CPU port directly here in the middle. And directly beneath that is our first of our 2 M.2 slots. The second one is down here between the second and third graphics card slot. Now what would you use your M.2 slots for? Solid state drives in most cases, either a serial ATA or an NVMe drive. Good examples of a drive to install on this machine would be Crucial's MX300 or Samsung's 850 EVO, which are serial ATA drives. Or you could install the new NVMe drives such as Intel's 600P or Samsung's 960 EVO or 960 Pro drives. Very, very quick. If you can get a good deal on them, they are definitely fast drives. Moving down the left side of the board, there is an additional fan header, probably for the exhaust fan out the back right next to the video card slot. And then moving down, you can see our audio chip. It's actually labeled Audio Boost, but that is the Realtek audio chip right there. You can see that we've got multiple card slots. The top 2 silver looking ones, the silver metal is simply protector so that when you're installing particularly large or heavy graphics cards, it reduces the chance that you'll damage the slots. The 2 silver slots are where you're going to install 2 graphics cards. You'll use the top slot if you're just using 1 graphics card or both if you're using 2. There is also several PCI 1X slots as well as an additional X16 slot down at the bottom for additional accessories that you may want to install in the future. Coming down to the bottom of the motherboard, we have quite a few connectors. I'll go through one at a time. Starting on the left-hand side of the board, we have our front panel audio connector. What is this for? Headphone and microphone jack on the front of your case. Next to that, we have another chassis fan header for another intake or exhaust fan for our system. To the right of that, we have our RGB header strip. What is this used for? A up to 2 meter long RGB full color 16.7 million color lighting strip if you are interested in putting RGB lights in your system. Yes, this board does support RGB lighting. To the right of that, we have a COM port. Yes, there is actually a serial port on this motherboard. I don't expect most of you will use this, but if by chance you have a need for a serial port, it does include one. Now, it does not include the header to plug into the back of your case using one of your slots, but you can buy those for a couple of dollars online if you're interested. Next to that, we have something I have not seen in a long time. A printer port. Yes, a parallel port, an LPT port. I have not actually seen one of these for years. If you by chance have an old parallel port based device and you need a system with a parallel port, here you go. Of all the next generation motherboards I reviewed, congratulations MSI, this is the first that has an actual parallel port on it. I don't think many of you will use it, but it's there just in case. Next to that, we have our trusted platform module. This is also something most of you won't use, but there are some people who need these things. It's a TPM plug if you need it. Next to that are 2 ports that actually many of you will use. A pair of USB 2.0 headers. What would you use these for? USB 2.0 headers, ports on the front of your computer case, or a module that you can use to put 2 more USB 2 ports on the back of your case. USB 2 still has a lot of value, either for printers, webcams, older devices that either aren't compatible with USB 3 or you simply need some extra ports. And then finally, cooling. Are you planning on using something such as the Corsair H80i or H100i with Corsair Link Liquid Cooler? Those need a USB 2 header on the motherboard in order to allow the software to work. I will be installing various liquid coolers on various Z270 motherboards, and when I put a Corsair Link compatible liquid cooler on the board, I've got to have a USB 2 header in order to plug it in. So those come in handy for that purpose as well. To the right of the two USB ports is a speaker port, a chassis speaker port. I haven't used one of these in years either, but it's interesting that it's on here. If you happen to have a computer case that has a basic beeping speaker, or you want to add one, well, there's the option. And then to the right of that are the pins you use for the power LED, the hard drive LED, the reset switch, and the power button for the front of the case. Coming up the right side of the board, we have another chassis fan header. There are 6 of these on this board in total for various case fans, CPU cooler fans, etc. Directly above that, we have 6 serial ATA ports for hard drives or solid state drives. And then above that, we have 2 USB 3.0 headers. What do we use these for? Either front panel USB 3.0 ports, or using an adapter, which costs less than $10, you can then put additional USB 3 ports on the back of your system. And then we've come back up to the 24-pin ATX connector and basically covered everything on this board. Looking at the I/O panel, you have quite a few features on this. One nice feature provided for backwards compatibility is a combo PS2 port. This will support either a PS2 keyboard or PS2 mouse if you happen to have an older one and want to use it. Directly beneath that are 2 USB 2.0 ports. What would you use these for? Keyboard and mouse. Or printer and webcam if by chance you have a different keyboard or mouse setup, but those are for a variety of devices that simply don't need USB 3.0. Now let me talk about the 2 video out ports. First of all, if you are using an add-in graphics card, you will not use either of these video out ports. These are only for when you're using the integrated graphics on all of the Intel processors. The first is the DVI-D port, the digital video interface port. This will support up to 1600p resolution at 60 Hz. More likely you would be up to 1440p, which is a much more common resolution, or of course 1080p. The other one is an HDMI 1.4 port, 1080p at 60 Hz. It will actually run a 4K display, but only at 30 Hz, so you really wouldn't want to use it for that, except for short periods of time. There are 6 total USB ports. Let me divide this into 2 groups. The first are the ports on the right, which are USB 3.0 5 gigabit per second ports, and there are 4 of them. USB flash drives, external hard drives. You got 4 of them, which is enough for most people. Then there are 2 USB 3.1 super speed ports, 10 gigabit per second. There is one Type A port and there is one Type C port, the new Lightning reversible port that lets you plug in devices either direction. It's the new thing that's coming along. Then we have Intel's Gigabit Ethernet LAN port, and then we have our HD 8-channel audio with 6 different jacks for connecting subwoofers, rear speakers, side speakers, etc. if you want. Or you can of course simply plug in headphones or simple 2-channel speakers if you'd rather. So that's everything on the motherboard. What else do you get in the box? You get an I/O panel shield, of course, for the back of your system case. You'll need that for all of your ports to stick through. You get a nice detailed manual with a reasonable amount of information on the motherboard, the BIOS setup, etc. And you get 4 serial ATA cables for use for various drives, either hard drives or solid state drives. There is a quick installation and setup guide. Now, if you've installed a motherboard before, this may be enough. If you have never done this before, I recommend you watch my build videos because I will show a very detailed process of installing a CPU into this, RAM into this, and then this into a case. And I also recommend that you actually take the time to read the manual because it's not something you want to do wrong. You also get a driver CD. Now, this can help you get up and running if you are not online at the time that you set up your system. However, I would recommend that you check for updated versions of MSI software, and they do provide several useful and interesting programs on MSI's site before you install these, because usually the driver CDs are out of date by the time you actually get the box, set it up, and run it. So this has been my look at MSI Z270 SLI Plus Premium Motherboard at a non-premium price, $150. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel using the big huge red button directly below this video. Questions and comments in the comment section below this video, and as always, check out my video description below. Links to both Amazon and Newegg for this motherboard, the $120 version, and the $200 version if you are interested in its extra features. If you found this video useful and helpful in any way, please check out the links in my video description. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you next time.